Meta Perspective Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to Meta Perspective Podcast. We're your hosts, Alex,
Evan,
and the girl. This is the show we talk about deep and interesting topics and try to get to the heart of the idea through different perspectives.
but if you are joining us for the first time, please give the channel a follow and the video a like. We do random giveaways and things like that, so it doesn't hurt to stay active.
Speaking of staying active, don't forget to jump in that chat. We want you a part of this conversation as much as we are, because, of course, Meta Perspective Podcast is not meta
Without your perspective.
Boom. What are we looking at for a topic tonight?
Well, tonight we're going to be following up on kind of where we went a little bit last week with the discussion.
Conversations and whatnot.
Conversations.
Kind of like this.
Conversating about conversations. Last week we touched on kind of the ego elements of conversation, mainly how everybody wants to, on some level they want to kind of have their own voice be heard. It makes people feel like they exist, and that can cause problems in the back and forth. People talking over each other, interrupting each other, and in order to get the right mindset for discussion, which should be an equal contribution from each party. You have to give it. There's a give and take. There's a listening element to it. There's a time to express your opinions and things like that. And we're gonna take last week's discussion a little bit further and discuss how you should conversate.
I like this. Because I'm listening and now ready to respond. I think that's a big thing about conversation. I think the biggest issue when it comes to communication, kind of like the last episode we had, when it comes to like political stuff and people not hearing each other's sides, thinking that, like the ego, which was the last topic, was all about the ego in conversation. This is more about conversation as in itself and kind of how it works. So last week with the ego, most people, they just want to speak. They want to be heard. They want to feel like they're heard. They want to see other people react off their stuff in a positive way. You react in a negative way. Well, let me rephrase it. Let me cut you off and rephrase it. You don't know what I'm trying to say. Because if you knew what I was trying to say, you would see how good this is. A lot of times we assert ourselves into a conversation more than we actually appreciate the person we're having a conversation with. So I would throw up to start that I think that when it comes to conversation, listening is probably the biggest issue. Like genuinely listening. Like if I ask you your political views, and for example, that's a great example because it's political views. You cannot boil that down into a sentence. I need to explain why I believe what I believe when it comes to politics. Now, if you cut me off halfway and you're like, well, how do you feel about what's going on here or this or that? From my perspective, you didn't ask me the question to hear my response. It's almost like you're asking me what my political views are so that if they differ, you can educate me, which right there, if you're not listening to me after asking me my political beliefs, then suddenly your entire motive for the conversation becomes tarnished and kind of comes off as rude.
Yeah, objective based.
Yeah, it's like, did you ask me this because you want to get to know me better? Or did you ask me this because you want to see if I'm on your team? And if I'm not, you'll correct me real quick. Like, if you really cared about me, it wouldn't be my beliefs, it would be me. If I believe in negative stuff, you might not approve. If I'm a Satanist, a Luciferian, or I'm like, I worship the devil, you wouldn't be, you might not like that. But if you love me as a friend or family, you might be like, well, I want to hear your side. Explain this to me. Okay, now that I've heard you out, can I explain my side? More than likely, they'll listen. But if you don't listen, the conversation was done before it started.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, at least when it comes to political discussions, it's it becomes less of a conversation and more closer to a debate kind of thing, and that can get hairy. I mean, that's the example we've been using because that illustrates the problems with conversation in our modern society probably the best, because a lot of it is, or a lot of political discussion is, this kind of way. It's projecting egos, it's defense mechanisms, because no one really at the end of the day, no one really wants to be challenged in their belief. They want to feel secure in their own beliefs. So anything that's opposed to that, it becomes a defense mechanism. And kind of what we were saying about, or what we've been talking about interrupting and things like that. That's a lot of the times when it will happen is as soon as my ego feels, just the right amount of threatened is when I would interject and throw something and kind of throw a wrench in the direction that the person that I'm talking to might be going, because I would rather, deject from the point being made to protect my own ego rather than sit there and listen to my beliefs being challenged in front of my eyes.
Well, it can be tough too when you might ask somebody a question. It's all about intentions too. If I go into a conversation to ask somebody their political beliefs, thinking they're on my side because there's something I want to say, and they start to say something that's opposite, naturally as humans, we're like, let me dovetail this and try to get us to an agreeable point so that I can get to what I originally wanted to say. At some point, you got to stop and go, I never wanted to get to know them or understand them. What I wanted was for them to hear me, and I wanted them to hear this. But I can't just say that. I have to understand where they're at first. Okay, I don't like where you're at. Let me try to get you to where I'm at so you can hear me out, and now you'll listen to me. It's not taking them serious as a person, and it's the ego entirely saying, I'm right. I'm not trying to understand truth, understand this world, understand right and wrong. I think I already know it, and I'm trying to get you to agree with me. I think a lot of that, that is a lot of it, is people aren't asking each other questions with the intention of getting to know them or educate themselves. Like me, over time, I've changed this because I've recognized this in myself. So now if I hear somebody talking about a political thing, and I disagree with it, that motivates me. Before, it's like you might not get into that conversation at all. But now it's like, no, this is what I want. I want to know your side. And by the end of the conversation, they still won't really know where I stand. Why? Because people love to talk. So if I ask somebody a question, it's guaranteed they're going to give me what I want, whether I want it or not. It's what I want. I want to know you and your beliefs. I want to know you. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you will tell me until I stop you. You will just keep telling me. You'll double down. You'll start repeating yourself. You're like, I want you to know me. Everybody wants to be known. The problem is people go into conversations. Two people go into the same conversation with the intention of them being known. Neither of them are listening to each other or trying to know the other person. So most conversations fall apart before they start because it's people trying to kind of compete against each other once they realize, oh, we both have something we're trying to share. And that's where you get the one-uppers and all that type of stuff. If I went to this place and blah, blah, oh, well, let me tell you this time I went to China. And you're like, oh, that's a way cooler story than my trip to Detroit. Son of a bitch. Like, you get a lot of that type of stuff. But what it really comes down to is the proper way of communication is first analyzing, why do I communicate? Do I communicate because I want to feel heard and feel validated? Or do I communicate because I want to educate myself on different perspectives from people I could never be? Well, that one sounds like it could actually benefit me. So if I ask somebody their political views, even if it's the opposite of what I believe, the way I see their perspective by listening to them gives me insight to what's going on and how everybody sees everything. And it's like, wow, from your perspective, it's like I can see how intricate that side is and see how, while my side's still very intricate, they're almost equally intricate, but in different ways. So if there's wrong, there might be wrong in both. I wouldn't know that if I didn't talk to people who disagreed with me. But if I just always want to feel right, I'll let my ego tell people what they want to hear, and then I'll let them get it off their chest and not really listen to them. That's what I believe most conversation is now. It's meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that people actually ask. The only reason why someone would ask a genuine opinion of what someone else thinks is if they thought that they could somehow learn from them or gain from them valuable information.
While I 100% agree with that, I think that's what people need to program. What is valuable information? You know, if I'm somebody on the right or the left, and I say, I understand all the information on my side, which is why I know the other side's wrong. If I talk to somebody on the other side, it might challenge my beliefs and make me realize that I might be catering too much to one perspective, which is keeping me from being able to analyze aspects on the other perspective. So it's like, what is useful information? Is it only what you decide is useful? Or do you say, trying to listen to everybody and really listening to them, asking them questions, even if you disagree, asking them questions and trying to understand. Instead of saying, I know what's right, I don't want to hear your brainwashed jarble, it's no, as a human being, I want to genuinely hear you. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to let you have the floor and go on. I won't interrupt. I won't add to it. I will just sit there and take it all in. And by the time it's done, a lot of the times I stop and I go, that wasn't as basic and surface level as I thought that answer was going to be. Like, that person gave me so much. It's actually challenged some of the things I believe from somebody I would have never thought had it in them. Somebody who's like, I'm not political, but I mean, this is how I see stuff. It's like, wow, like that's actually, for somebody who doesn't put much thought into it and isn't involved, like that's an amazing perspective. It makes me think. So now, what I thought was valuable information, or what I deemed valuable information, asking this person their thoughts, not valuable at all. But when I do that and put another human life above just information, let me get information from this other life. Suddenly I'm surprised, and it's like, that was valuable information, hidden in a spot I never thought to look. I think when it comes to getting the truth and learning things, you have to go outside the box. You can't just say, I understand this aspect of reality, I think, and that's where I'll stay. If you want to understand where you're at, you gotta look around. You can't just ask for directions from people who look like they've been traveling the same road. You got to sit there and be like, this guy looks like, this guy, he's in a torn up t-shirt, flip-flops, and some gym shorts. Everything's stained, standing on the porch of like a condemned looking house. This guy can't give me directions. Or maybe this person has been everywhere and back. I can make an assumption, or I can say this person might have something valuable. I'm probably not going to walk up onto his porch and start talking to him. But if I run into him somewhere, I might spark a conversation. And I think that's the heart of what I'm saying from my idea of this is, when it comes to communication, you have to care about the person, and you have to humble yourself and understand that, yes, I might know more about this, but I've never lived their life. So even if they know almost nothing about the topic I am a pro at, they might have a perspective I've never seen. And that perspective, if I apply it to what I'm looking at, could change the course of everything for me and how I view it. And then suddenly I see what they can't see, but with the right perspective they had and I didn't. Communication is a transfer of information. This person's 45 years old and I disagree with everything they say, but 45 years of experience on this planet will give me some useful information.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like what we were talking about last week, right? Yeah, I think it really comes down to your objective, going in. There's a difference between having let's say, a conversation that maybe devolves into a debate with somebody over politics that maybe you know them, maybe you don't know them. Either way, if you know them, you're probably trying to score some type of psychological dominance over them. And if you don't know them, you might just be, or I guess,
No, I see what you're saying.
are you trying to build rapport with this person? Are you trying to further this relationship and have an ultimately walk away from this discussion with them having a better view of you? Or do you not care? Is it more about like scoring? That's where the ego comes in, as we were saying. You want to validate yourself, your own beliefs, and strengthen what that is.
And those questions by themselves are what people should ask. I mean, talking to people your whole life is what you will do from beginning to end. At some point, you should ask those questions. I mean, those, like, you may not have framed it that way, but those questions are what any intelligent person should do if they care about what they believe.
And that's kind of where I was getting with the valuable information side. It was, if let's say that you're talking to somebody who knows a lot about stock trading or something, and you're kind of into it, but you can obviously tell that they know more about it. Like, you're going to be more willing to listen to what that person has to say because you are gaining valuable information for your life. And listening to them is also going to build rapport with them, and it might benefit you in a social way too. But, when it comes to these, online fights and conversations aside, like a face-to-face interaction, it comes down to, do you care about this person? Whether they like you or not, does that affect your life? Do you have anything to benefit socially or in that moment, that night, that situation, or at work or whatever? Is there a reason why you have to maintain a good relationship with that person? And all these are all factors into how you would approach, or how you should approach interacting with them differently. Because, if it's your boss or somebody who works at your same place that maybe it's above you, maybe it's the same level, it's like, I'm going to approach that conversation differently. I'm going to be more willing to listen to them and to hear them out and ask what they think, because I know that allowing them that space to communicate to me is going to benefit me in some way or another. But if I truly need, like, something that they're saying intrigues me, and, I have a reason to listen to them, then that's kind of a different boat. And, you have to kind of, we're almost suggesting like a social, not patronizing aspect of this, but you really have to give people the space to exist in order for them to do that back to you.
And that's why I'm like, for proper communication, what I argue is humbling yourself, being able to hear. There is a patronizing aspect of hearing people. I think like, for me, that's what I went through when I took time not speaking and trying to learn what conversation even is.
And
because it's
maybe
not just
patronizing is the wrong
It's
word.
not just me sharing views and this and that. Something's happening when I communicate with somebody. Sometimes, like, very strong bonds are formed from a short conversation. Like, there's stuff happening within the exchange of information. Things are happening. So when I took time to try to understand what it was that was happening, that's part of what I learned was most people, they just want to be heard. So they'll step over their same argument. Some people will even contradict themselves in the same conversation. They start with one idea and they end with something that debunks the first idea. But I'll sit there and I'll listen through the whole thing. Once it's done, I'll say, every time a thought pops up when they first start, and it's like, well, you could kind of contradict this point, but don't. If you understand what you need to say, get it out of your head and focus. And I'd refocus. And a few times I'd even try to go back into my thoughts and be like, what was it I wanted to interject with? And I can't remember. And I immediately get kicked right back to the conversation. I'm like, listen. By the end of the conversation, I'll have 5 points pop immediately back up in my head. Why? Because It's simple controlling of the mind. I believe if what I have to say is important and relevant to the conversation, it will come back. I believe that. Why would it not? If we're talking about something I understand and I have a point I already want to add, that won't change. I just need to stop focusing on what I want to say and focus on listening. And when it's my turn to talk, what I want to say should come back to me if it's important. And every single time it came back to me until I fully trusted my own brain for doing basic math and being like, oh, well, I don't remember what I wanted to say to the beginning of your argument. Well, then I didn't understand the argument. It's like everything comes back to me because I genuinely listened and I know exactly what to say. And a lot of times some things will fall off and it'll come back to me. It'll be like, hey, this is what you want to say. I'm like, I see how that's no longer relevant. After hearing his whole point, it's no longer relevant. Yes, it's relevant if that's his point, but in the context of what he was saying, it fell off. And now attacking that for that, even if I'm right, doesn't change the argument. And that's the idea is nothing is concrete necessarily when it comes to like conversation and stuff like that, who's right or wrong, because it comes down to everything, even how you say it. But
dynamic. But
when you listen to somebody, you let them fully go through. A lot of times you realize they didn't have a point. They just want to talk. Their own point contradicts itself, and this in itself is not something you could really focus on and believe. If you really focus on this, it eats itself. It's a self-eating snake. This is damaging and not good.
Ouroboros.
So that's when, at the end of the conversation, I go, well, what if, for your first part, you did say this? What if you changed your attention to the other person instead of yourself? And then the end of the conversation, like you were saying, instead of focusing on you instead of them, focus on them instead of you. Like flip it on both sides. And that's when the person will be like, oh my God, that's it. Well, you figured it out. And it's like, I've always kind of seen it this way. But it's like, I'm glad that this conversation was able to help you gain information by us having this.
Right.
And then with what I gave them, their mind explodes. And you watch it explode. They're like, oh, you can see their eyes flickering, like darting. There's so many synapses, everything's firing, pop, 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 like firecrackers in their brain. And then they're like, so hear me out. And you're like, now this is for me. Now I'm going to listen. And then they tell me something through their perspective with what I added. They're now able to take a chunk of my perspective, apply it to themselves instantaneously, and now give me a new theory they just thought up that actually I have never heard.
Right.
And
then
now
it becomes the constructive.
And now as it goes on, now they really start listening to me. Why? Because most people do not want to hear you just talk all the way out. They just want to be heard. So when you let them be heard, most people will exhaust themselves. And once they're done, they're like, okay, I want to hear now. What do you have to say? I just emptied my purse.
Right.
Criticisms. Now I feel vulnerable because I said so much. So then now they're over listening. So now you can explain everything and they will hear you out all the way to the end. And then that is how, once I hear them out, once they hear me out all the way to the end, they're like, whoa. And now we're exchanging information and we're now I took what he had and I genuinely looked at it and I absorbed it. And I said, I see holes here and here. And they said, that's what I needed. Oh my God, boom, boom, I fixed it. I get it. So then that would mean this, this, and this. And I'm like, oh, holes filled. That would also mean this and this. And now we're going back. We're having constructive conversation. And we're also adding to each other in ways where we start to create this bond where now it's like we had a moment. I don't know what this exchange of information was, but it was a moment. It felt like, it feels like I can't just not talk to you again. I need to hang out with this dude. We need to smoke. We need to talk. We need to drink. We need to whatever we need to do. We've all had that moment where a deep conversation where somebody really listened to you and it motivated you became something. And that's why, because both of you were in a situation where maybe you don't know each other well. So you're willing to hear them all the way out. Unlike a best friend or somebody that you've known since high school who's like, I hate this political thing. And you're like, well, I've known you long enough to say, fuck you, and then say your political thing. But it's not constructive because you're not applying that respect to that person. versus somebody you just met, you're going to be more respectful to. And if you can apply that same thing to somebody you already know, you can actually retransform relationships, even with family, with somebody who doesn't listen. If you start listening, you'll notice they'll start listening. And that's when things can start to be reciprocated again. There's an equal exchange and an equal flow of information. And if I try to speed that up or slow that down or cut that off, if I try to control it, it's a natural thing. If I try to control it, it's going to cause issues.
You touched on a couple different things that I'd like to at least address or at least put into context. And I think,
I'm going to use it real quick.
oh man, now I'm just talking to nobody. No respect.
Oh my gosh. It's recording. Hold on. I'll listen live.
All right. Well, okay. So Alex touched on a couple things I wanted to address. So the first one would be the way to kind of approach conversating with others, and that is listening with a clear mind. It's not just listening; it's listening with a clear mind and fully. It's kind of silencing your brain, tabula rasa. And what happens when you do that is, or I guess on the flip side, most people will listen to something and if they're trying to gain rapport with somebody, let's say it's somebody they want to impress or be friends with, they will usually grab a hold of a couple bits of information for what they're saying, and they're going to kind of put that in their back pocket and save it for when it's time for them to talk so they can try to relate. And this is not... All right, let me just start over now that you're back. I can actually talk to somebody.
Just wait till I get the new Sony streaming catheter.
We'll cut this out of post.
We'll have catheters here live soon, and for guests, in case you want to join this show and have a small bladder, we got you covered. Stay on air with ever running upstairs.
Yeah, let us know if you want those Sony sponsored catheters.
They're called streamers for the streamer.
The Sony streamer.
The Sony streamer.
But no, all right, so get back to what you're saying. So
if I see this pop up somewhere, I'm going to get upset.
Because I was listening to you
royalties
in the right way, and this is how this should be done. You said a couple things that I want to at least address or at least kind of digest here. The number one or the first thing was basically, the way that you listen to somebody matters, both for the respect outcome and also for your own success in these conversations. Because most people, what they will do is they will listen to somebody, and let's say it's somebody that I'm trying to be a new friend to you, and I'm trying to build rapport with you. Most people will listen to somebody and find a couple little nuggets that they're going to put in their back pocket to where when it's time for them to speak, that they're going to try to relate to somebody based on those things. But what happens when you do that is that you're too focused on a certain outcome. You're trying to create a situation. You're trying to recreate a situation that's happening in your mind into the conversation, and hopefully it influences the other person, or at least plays out the way that your ego or your mind thinks it will. But the best way to do that is to tabula rasa, blank mind. You listen to them without trying to think. And kind of like you were saying, if it's important, it's going to come back. But more importantly, what that does is allows you to be dynamic. It allows you to flow, and the person will pick up on that. They will like literally feel that you are listening to them so intently that when they keep talking, they will feel you listening. And that's like a weird psychological thing.
It's like the beginning of the connection being built, where it's like I said, a conversation does something to you. The exchange of information makes a difference in who you're talking to.
Yeah, and so that's the first idea, that in order for this to work, it has to be an equal level of give and take, or listen and talk. And kind of to go further, kind of what you're saying about, somebody going through a conversation and maybe the first couple things that you were thinking and holding on to, maybe they're not relevant later, or maybe they address that later, or it's something that if you interrupted them and it became this back and forth, well, then it would never really get addressed. Both people would feel unsatisfied, and the conversation would just devolve into a tangent of different things.
And a lot of arguments, which
leads to
usually
arguments.
ends to both people, once they get in their cars and they're driving, they both have regrets. They're like, I feel like I was just mean to that person. And you'd be surprised. The other person's like, I feel like I was kind of rude back. And it's like, basically, you can either have a proper communication where you both can feel the connection growing, or you become selfish, you both do it your own way, and you drive away going, I feel like I just did some damage. I don't know how, and I don't know what that means, but I have regret for how that went.
Even if it's not as extreme as causing damage, it's also it's robbing both people of the intellectual or the memorable experience of what that conversation,
Which is damage in itself. Why do we feel the need to have this conversation? Is there something inherent that says both of us can help each other, and instead of us helping each other, we hurt each other? And like, not hurt each other like, maybe hurt each other in the sense that I didn't give you what you needed and you didn't give me what I needed. Instead, we just ended up arguing, and I'd rather have not started that conversation and we just high-fived and sang a shanty. Like, instead, it's like we try to talk about it and both of us are unsuccessful, and we feel this weird, I don't want to say damage, but it's more of like you feel a failure.
Dissatisfaction.
Yeah, it's like a disappointment.
An unfulfillment.
Yeah, like something was supposed to happen. I could feel the magic that was there, but it never evolved. Versus you get into a conversation and you can feel the magic, where you start to feel this this connection growing. It's almost like you can feel their perspective, and you're like, wait, no, I see what you're saying. I this and that, and it just starts bouncing, and then the conversation starts to go shorthand, where it's like, I can say this, and that's it, and you get it. You're connected, and then you grab it and you say this. I already know what you mean by that, and we're just passing it back and forth, But
well, I had some more to go to that. And yeah, to pick up that idea, it leads to a more fulfilling back and forth exchange. And then kind of the end side of that is ultimately, you do build more rapport with somebody, fully listening to them with a blank mind and without interjecting it. And that's where you earn that respect. And it also, when you get to that place with somebody, whether you intentionally or consciously did that by listening to them with a blank mind, or if they're doing that to you, then both people are more open to, or it's more likely that you're going to come to an insightful thought from that, because you weren't worried about this battle back and forth, or saving, like holding on to ideas and things like that. You're more likely to pick up at the end, have a better full picture, and then from there, it's more likely to be constructive. And from that, you do gain rapport with people. You do actually build better relationships. And, if your goal is to change somebody's mind on something, which is difficult to do, especially in the concept of politics, which, we're talking about conversation in a general sense. It doesn't have to be, we're not just talking about political conversations. We're talking about any conversation, even if somebody's telling you about a story or something like that. You fully listen. At the end, they give you respect. They allow you they give you the floor at that point, and then everybody's more satisfied, better off, and then all these little things that you could have interjected all along the way, if they're important, they'll come back. If not, you gained rapport with somebody, and you actually accomplished, your objective or whatever. You had a greater benefit in the long run fully listening than you did doing this, ego battle stuff.
Yeah. It's like a good comparison I'd give is like a mechanic who thinks they know too much. We all know that guy, not even a mechanic, that car guy who doesn't actually really work on cars, who's like, nah, I know what the problem is. You're like, yeah, well, okay, so when I'm driving my car and I'm on the highway, like I start feeling the car shaking a little bit. They're like, yeah, I know what that is. I know, bro. I know what that is. Yeah, that's your that's your thing. It's
Your wheel bearing.
yeah, it's one of those things. Name a thing. It's always something. Oh, turns out I actually got my tires rotated, and I guess they didn't tighten the lug nuts all the way on the wheel. The car's actually fine. The wheel's loose. Now, maybe as a car guy, you could figure that out. If you listened to me, if you actually cared and you weren't like, let me show you how good I am at cars. Instead, take yourself out of it and be like, instead of, if I'm really that good at cars, I don't need to prove it to you. Instead, I want to help you if you have a car problem. So you said something's wrong with your car, tell me what it is. And as you're saying everything, sometimes when I turn, it's kind of weird, and it's like, this and that, blah, 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 like other than that, like everything goes fine. What about when you give gas? Any weird, like anything? No, everything's fine. What about sounds? No, everything's fine until I get on the highway, and then it really starts kind of vibrating and I can hear the vibration. Okay, well, that sounds like your wheel's not all the way tightened on. Now, I wouldn't come to that conclusion if I didn't listen to you all the way out. As a car guy who knows everything about a car, I know what that means mechanically when that happens. Okay, well, what if it's not mechanical? What if the wheel's just not tight all the way? It's like, that's not a problem with the motor. You're trying to think of all these functioning parts because your mind is wrapped into this thing. Maybe take yourself out and be like, hey, I know cars. I don't need to prove it to myself by focusing on all these moving parts. I understand how it all works together. So I'll listen to somebody else. And when they're done, it's like, oh, have you had any work done recently? No, I just got my, I got a new tire and had my tires rotated. But no, nothing. You're like, everything's been running fine. Did this problem start before or after that? After. Let's go take a look at your lug nuts. Let's see if I can't tighten them up and fix that problem by screwing it on tight. Like a lot of times, it can be something that's small. Oftentimes, I've had a few issues recently where it was like, oh, that's all I had to do. Everything's fine. But when you have a conversation, you're like, especially politics. I understand politics. So let's have a political conversation. You don't care about what the actual issue is, because you're talking about what the problem is, and I'm telling you, I already know what the problem is. You don't need to explain anymore. You just need to listen to me and do what I say and follow me.
Right, because what's happening during that conversation, or the example you let out, is the person who believes themselves to be a car expert is trying to psychologically establish themselves as the authority in this conversation and the reason why you should listen to them. And kind of like I was saying earlier, the person who is asking these questions has a genuine problem and is trying to gain valuable information. So in that case, they're willing to listen to an authority figure, but at the same time, you'll notice that those false authority figures they'll ask you about your problem. They won't really even present a solution all the time. They maybe throw something like, oh, you need a new starter. And then they'll go right into, oh, one time when I was blah, blah, blah. And then it's just a stage for them. So they've established authority. They're on the stage. So now you have to listen to them. And that's kind of like what happens a lot of times is it's preying on psychological vulnerabilities or establishing yourself as an authority in order to express yourself more in your ego to thrive. And people are going to do that, but if you actually let them talk and let them get it all out, if someone's kind of bullshitting or blowing hot air, they can only last so long. And after a certain point, they start to devolve and not really make any sense. And at that point, they'll stop. And then they realize at that point that you've allowed to give them the floor and they've expressed themselves, so they're more willing to listen to what you have to say. And if you actually become the authority, well, actually I did a bunch of research on Google. It's probably this, and this. I changed that. I checked that out, and then now that they feel like they have to project less, and it's more likely to be actually like maybe you guys will actually figure out your problem, or maybe you guys will be friends now, as opposed to this like hierarchy of dominance in conversations.
And it's like I said, if you look at yourself as somebody worthwhile, if you look at yourself as intelligent, or if you look at yourself as somebody who wants to know the truth and not speak lies, if any of those are true, why are you trying to prove to somebody else that you're right? If you're trying to convince somebody, I already know the answers, that's insecurities, because you don't have the information to back up the statement. So now you're trying to basically manipulate the person and and kind of gaslight them with trickery, being like, oh, I'm going to say, kind of like what you said, it sounds like your starter. Now, I'm vulnerable. Before you try to ask me how it could be the starter, let me just go to a story where a starter went out, and I don't know, and I honestly don't know enough about a starter. So let me tell this story that made me feel like I understood a starter. In this moment, when I realize I can't explain what it is, my brain will take me right to the story that makes me feel like I know what it is. Oh, well, that's where that information comes from. I'll regurgitate this, and then I'll just, that is manipulation and a form of gaslighting. It's like I'm going here, but with the intention of recognizing I don't have the answer for you. But instead of acknowledging I don't have the answer and maybe I should get more information before I try to diagnose your vehicle, instead, I'm going to save face by jumping right to a story, which hopefully convinces you the way the story convinces me that's
You're the authority now.
You get excited. You're like, that sounds like what my car's doing. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I guess that's why my brain said that. I don't actually know how cars work. I figure some things out myself and watch YouTube videos and
But you like me now, right?
yeah, and then they fix some stuff on their car and do all this, and it's like, oh, turns out you just needed gas. We didn't check that. I was more focused on proving to you that I knew what the problem was, that I didn't actually stop to try to see what the problem could be.
Well, this happens and I guess, tying it perfectly to political discussions, this happens all the time, where somebody tries to establish themselves as an authority. In politics, or at least, the inner workings of all this stuff is very complicated. People have careers doing it where they learn all that they can all the time, and you can't learn everything. So, if you're just getting information from other people, you're just kind of regurgitating beliefs, and you're trying to establish yourself. You're trying to dominate the conversation as, you should listen to me because I know what I'm talking about. And that happens a lot in these back and forths. And especially people you don't know, but especially people that you do know, that try to, maybe their objective is to validate their own beliefs. Maybe they go a step further and try to convince you to believe what they believe, which also strengthens their beliefs, and that's this back and forth, like conversational jujitsu that most people find themselves in. And, kind of going back to what we're saying, if you let that run its course, then it's less likely to be a confrontational situation. And also, I guess giving people the space to fully express themselves kind of opens up the door. If you do want to challenge them, you'll have that opportunity if you let them talk long enough.
And they'll be more open to hearing the challenge.
Right, exactly. Because,
I'm not hearing something you said I don't like and immediately challenge it.
Right.
I'm letting you explain everything, and now you're like, if you have something to challenge, well, all my points. I have no cards left. Like I said, if you ask somebody about themselves or what they believe, they'll tell you for days. They'll go on and on until they loop themselves, and they'll talk themselves to exhaustion and be like, but once they get to that point, they want a response because they've never unloaded. Most people have never really unloaded their ideas onto a person so heavily without being interrupted or, lane changes or, it's like, I'm on topic. This is what I want to say. And I'm still saying it and I'm still saying it and I'm still going and I'm still going. And this is everything. And I'm going to reiterate a few things and double up on this and really build my support. And this is, and now I'm out of stuff. People will literally look at you like, what do you have to say? I need a response from that. And that's when you challenge. That's when you say, again, that's why you also hold your own things. Because if I start throwing stuff out to challenge you in the middle of your thing, I'm not allowing myself to be challenged. It's almost like I'm afraid to hear your side because I'm afraid it'll challenge mine. But if I hear you out all the way, then it's the person's eager. It's, I want to know what you have to say about all of that because I feel like I did a good job explaining my point and it's ironclad. So what do you think? That's when you can go, actually, now that I've heard you all the way out, I don't have anything to argue as far as you being wrong. That's actually correct. But maybe if we change the perspective over here and this is the goal instead of that being the goal.
Yeah.
And that's when the person will start interrupting you.
That's-
They'll be like, wait, so if I change it, then it would be this. And you're like, yes. And that's where it starts to go
Right.
quick, where it's like, then this. And you both start wiring stuff. And that's when all of a sudden, what you've added to them will start adding to you.
And then that's when an alternative perspective goes from being confrontational to being constructive. And it works like one of the strategies
There's an art
that
to
I
it.
do. I haven't quite figured out if it works 100% because it does challenge people's egos. And I think that's more the problem than what I'm doing. But in listening to somebody, I'm a pretty good listener. I don't need to convince anybody of anything that they, know or, I'm strengthened in my beliefs and what I think about most things. So I'll give people the space. And one of the things that I do is almost one of the strategies I employ is
Defecate.
almost a Socratic type of method. That's like, in its basic form, it's like the child who's like, but why? Oh, why is the sky blue? Oh, it's blue because of, the atoms and the water in the atmosphere. But why? That's the most basic form. But if you just listen to somebody and you're like, so you said this, but, why do you believe that? Or why does this mean that? And those are the kind of things where you can actually challenge somebody and kind of put it on them to explain themselves without being confrontational.
Yeah, as long as they fully go through their thing and they're ready for a response, when you ask them, they're not going to sit there and have excuses. Why? Because they've told you every supporting detail.
Right.
So now they have to back it up. And there's a difference. If you try that same thing and interrupt and say, but why? Why would you believe that? That's how defense starts. And then it's, how couldn't you? What would you, do you believe this? And then it's just defense throwing back and forth instead of that person feeling vulnerable, sharing all of themselves. Then you go, now, I like that. I have a couple things. So the first part, you said this. Why do you believe that? Because the second part, you said that. Before I touch on that, you said this as an idea for a second part. So I don't fully see. I personally don't see how these things fully integrate.
Yeah.
So why do you feel this way about that?
Yeah. Why does the story about the starter relate to my car? Or something like that. It's like.
But I would argue that the strongest form of communication is real communication, which is just genuine. It has to be genuine. And for me, when it came to conversation and understanding how conversation worked, the first thing for me understanding, before I even started to understand conversation, I had to destroy myself because I understood that everything I was trying to do was from me. And I broke it down and I was like,
killing the ego.
it's very obvious. There's two sides of conversation. When it comes to communication, it's two people. I can't have a conversation and communicate with myself without being crazy and not wanting to do it. So how do I communicate with another person if I am kind of in the way of that other person? And so I took myself out of the equation, just listen to people. Realize that most people will just keep talking and talking and talking. If you let somebody just keep talking, they'll never end. They'll never end.
Well,
They will keep
end when they hit a end.
But but the thing is their conversation, it's not going to be dog food isn't as healthy as it should be. There's these regulations. And then by the end of the conversation, you're talking about or middle of the conversation, it's like, the inhumanity of zoos. And then it ends with this is why we don't put lipstick and test lipstick on humans. We test it on pigs. And you're like, there's a lot. You're a very passionate person for animals and you love animals. There's no question. And I agree. I love animals. But for the conversation, for the communication, it seems like you're just venting anger. It doesn't seem like you have any thoughts of how things should be fixed or not fixed. You're just stuck on a problem in your mind. And to me, when it comes to conversation, it has to be genuine. I have to take myself out of it completely. And again, it's hard practice because it is a natural thing to involve yourself into the conversation.
That is killing the ego right there.
But every time I go to have a conversation, the first thing I do is remind myself, I asked the question. It's my turn to listen. I will not ask you a question and as you go, interrupt you. Unless the argument gets fully off, and then it's like, okay, I want to bring it back to my original question, only because now I'm having trouble following the relevancy. Like, I can follow you wherever we go, but I asked a specific question. I've followed you too far. We're in the woods. The question was about the city. We shouldn't even be seeing trees right now. It's like, where are you going with this? It's like, hear me out. Okay, I'll continue to let you guide us. But if I say that and then you go, oh, okay, back to the city. It's like, okay, you're scattered all over the place. It is what it is. But for me to get this is what I've learned. For me to get anything out of anybody for communication that could ever help me, I have to fully listen to them. That's the equal exchange. Most people sit there and they go, well, I want to talk, and that's for me. Is it? You can talk to yourself and tell yourself what you already know. What you want is somebody to validate it. What you're not factoring in is reality. And people have their own opinions and perspectives, and almost nobody you'll ever meet will fully believe everything you believe. So you have to get that out of your head immediately and say, maybe I'm that too. Maybe I don't fully understand anything. Maybe I don't fully understand anything. But I think I have a good idea. For me to add to that good idea, I need to listen to people. And when you ask a person a question, the intention is I'm asking you a question about something I'm interested in and I want to know more about. I want to know your perspective. So when I ask that question, it's not leading to me educating you. I'm trying to be educated. Even if I disagree with your beliefs, that's even better for me. You're anti everything I stand for. I want to know your mind. Why? Because I want to understand all the colors. And I have all the colors and then the harnessing of every color combined. So I have every spectrum of color and black. What about white? I thought you were passionate about colors and wanted to understand the whole spectrum. Yeah, I have all the colors in black. What about white? Well, that's not a color. You don't think that matters? You don't think that the antithesis of everything applied to this equation in your mind matters. So you have all the colors
that's
and then all of
Socratic.
them combined, but all of them absent. You won't factor that into your logic. And that's a lot of the problem is people think they already know. So again, it's humble yourself. You don't know. You could listen to 100 people tell you the wrong thing 100 times. And that will only help you understand what you know better. You would think, well, how would talking to somebody who doesn't understand the truth, how would that help me? It does. Understanding what wrong is helps you understand the wrong in yourself. You know, if you sit there and you say, well, I am color, I'm all the colors, and at the heart of it, all the colors combined is black, so I'm all the colors. But what if all of those colors, what if you could exist without all of those colors? Well, I only focus on the colors. I don't want to know about the white. I don't want to know about the absence of color because I am color. But technically, mathematically, that would be a part of that equation, is you love color, and if you combined all of them together, they're black. You have to be willing to see the side that goes against all of it to get the full understanding of this idea of the spectrum. So if I go to somebody and it's like, I know I'm right about this side, but I don't want to let you explain to me the other side. It's like, I have trouble understanding how people are so passionate about a topic and so unwilling to hear the opposite side of it. That's what I hear is, I love colors. Oh, well, have you ever seen white? They're like, I don't want to talk to you. I'm so mad you brought that up. It's like, but this is part of it. It's like, I know nothing about that, and I'm mad at you for bringing it up. It's like, well, maybe if you hear my theory in the absence of all these colors, you'll understand how it equates and how you can apply it to what you understand. Instead of interrupting me and telling me that you just understand color better than me and not being willing to hear the white.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you have to be willing to not just to humble yourself and be willing to be educated, but also you have to be willing to let your beliefs be challenged. You know, it's like, if you're a Christian, be willing to have a conversation with the Luciferian. If you're on the left, be willing to have a conversation with somebody on the right with the intention of learning. As a Christian, I'm not going to listen to a Luciferian and then and be like, but what if I talk to him, I'll turn devil? I believe what I believe, and I believe it strongly. So if I can talk to this Luciferian without worrying that the devil's going to get me. But I'm also open-minded and willing to hear anything. And this person will tell me everything they have. And I'm like, I still see why I hold on to mine, though. Can I share why I hold on to mine? Now this Luciferian is like, you know what? Yeah, I'm willing to hear anything you say because nobody's ever sat there and let me talk about the devil this long.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. And people are afraid of change. They're so passionate about the beliefs they have, and they are willing to destroy friendships and family with these arguments about what they want to talk about. But they're not willing to be challenged on the topic. Like, that's crazy to me.
And I think kind of what you're, in a way, what you're getting to is that the only way that you can have this constructive conversation, format is that you have to surrender to the listening side. You have to at least, you have to establish that for the other person in order to get, because most people, that's going to be, the default is not going to be that. So if you just default to the egotistical back and forth conversation, then it's not gonna result in the same way as the optimal scenario that we're talking about. Regardless of your objective, you have to be able to surrender and listen to somebody in order to create that space where now both people can actually somehow get on the same page and have constructive.
A great visual I got while you were saying that to explain it perfectly. You have two people who don't really understand what they're talking about. And they argue it at each other to try to validate what they think they know, just to drive each other apart and be like, they're stupid for their beliefs and vice versa. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That's why I say humble yourself. None of us really understand what the hell's going on. I still don't know why I fully have this meat suit and I'm some spirit controlling it. Like, what is this reality we're in and why does it even exist? Step one, we don't fucking know. Step two, talking to each other is how we figure it out. So if I'm not willing to gain anything from you, why am I talking to you?
Yeah.
Why am I coming to you trying to talk to you about cars to help you with your problem if I'm not willing to listen to you tell me what's wrong with your car fully? Like, I'm not trying to gain the information, because as you say stuff, it confuses me. I don't know. All I know is it's got to be this starter. And you're like, you don't know enough. Maybe if you heard me out, you'd be like, huh. Like, I'll help you research. I'll help you figure this out. I'll talk to some of my mechanic friends. No. I can't humble myself and embarrass myself. They look at me as the mechanic god, probably. So I have to have the answer.
Yeah.
So that they can come back and say I was right, and I can be like, I knew everything about cars. Because I don't want to be challenged to a point that makes me realize I have to keep researching and keep learning. I'd rather people tell me I already made it, even though we all know we'll never 100% be anywhere. We will never 100% understand anything.
And I think most people will be willing to give you an answer versus say they don't know.
Yes, because
saying you don't know and being open to admitting that you don't, that's humbling yourself. And that's like a step that most people won't take because they don't want their ego to die in that moment. You know,
it's one of my big pet peeves when it comes to conversation is, one, most people will say like we're only human. We're not perfect. You can never understand everything. You can never be perfect and understand everything. But when it comes to conversation, they sure fucking act like they do. And it drives me up the wall. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come to me and ask me to help them with a problem. And I will listen to them fully all the way through. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes as soon as they're done, they still can't humble themselves. They still want to know that they're the right in their relationship issues. They told me everything. So now tell me I'm right. So I go, well, when this happened, what was her situation? Where was she at in her life? And it's like, why does that matter? Answer the question. It does. And the fact that you're afraid of that question shows that part of you knows the answer. What it really comes down to is, if we're all flawed, imperfect creatures, and none of us really know anything, if that's the case, then why don't we act like that when we talk to people that we say we love? Why do we try to prove to people that we have all this worth with acting, instead of just listening to that person genuinely and giving a realistic response based off of who we are? How is that not the most valuable thing you could give? I can tell you all the times I've gone to clubs, parties, everywhere, and just met tons of people. Do you understand my conversations lasted probably 10 to 30 seconds. On to the next person. I was a crowd worker. But there was always a few people that I would just stop, and the entire night would just be about me and this dude. Where I said something, and he was like, oh, that reminds me of blah, blah. And I'm like, you know blah, blah, blah? And they're like, dude, I live by it. And I'm like, let's talk. Yeah. And we'll sit there and have a conversation for like 3 hours. The party's dying. People are like, hey, you guys got to go. And it's like, bro, let me get your number, bro. We got to keep talking, bro. Yeah. And it's like, suddenly the other 30 people I talked to, I don't remember a single name. All I remember is the one person who was genuine. I don't know who these people were, how much money they were worth. Their status and who they were meant nothing. But this random person who was just open took my attention. And people underestimate the power of themselves. You're unique. You're a one of a kind. The perspective you have, nobody else has. Like, sharing that is valuable. But growing that perspective is even more valuable. I would argue listening is more important than talking, because there's no reason to talk unless you have something to respond to. You know, it's like it might start with conversation of like, I have a question I want to ask. Okay, well then you should listen. It's basic conversation. Why are we talking if you're not trying to learn something? What are you doing?
Yeah.
You're trying to boost your ego. You're trying to show me that you're trying to raise your value in my eyes by not listening to me, by cutting me off, by not even acknowledging the points I finally got to make. It's like, you're just a person who's acting like I don't exist, trying to validate yourself to me, and then getting mad that I don't agree. Like you're a 5-year-old child in preschool not sharing your toys. I don't understand. Like, I don't care what your status is, because this dude in the corner in gym shorts and a fucking hoodie and flip-flops, it's 30 degrees outside. This guy who doesn't seem like he has it together has genuinely good conversation, knows how to listen to a person, and responds with valuable information based off of everything I've unloaded on them. Like, I'd rather talk to that person. I don't know anything about them. I don't know their status. He could be a millionaire. He could literally be the bum he looks like. It doesn't matter. People gravitate to what benefits. And it's like you said earlier, you know, it's like, what is the, you know, ultimately this, having these conversations benefits you. So when it really comes down to it, do you look at yourself as that millionaire guy? Because if you do, I mean, you should be the one trying to get information. You should be the one trying to network, trying to understand things. But if you look at, I mean, I feel like any business guy will tell you that if you think you know it all and walk up and try to show off to other business guys, they'll destroy you. And it's like, on one hand, we all know like there is a right way to communicate. And then we go and we meet somebody and we're like, let me show off and say things I don't understand. And it's like,
Get knocked down.
yeah, it's like, wow, what a fake conversation that led to nothing because of your insecurities. Like,
Yeah, that's a great way to say it, man. And honestly, I think we should explore more of these, or just this topic in general.
I definitely think there's a lot there. I think
you did.
from the ego on the last episode to conversation on this episode, I think we covered a lot, but I can also tell there's outlets. A lot of other ways this goes. I mean, to me, that's the overarching picture is what's going on in this reality. And you'll never learn unless you talk to people. You never make real connections with people unless you listen to them. Like, part of this human experience of whatever this is, information and communication is a huge part of it. We have these brains to figure things out for a reason. So find somebody, get to know them. Make the goal. Here's your homework. Find somebody, get to know them. Don't be worried about them getting to know you. Just get to know them.
Yeah.
If they ask questions, let them know. But don't push yourself on them. Just learn to be a person who wants to care about somebody else and make caring about them more important than your focus on you. You care about yourself. You love yourself. All right. End that chapter. Next chapter. Care and love somebody else.
Yeah. I think, just clear your mind, listen, be humble.
Be human.
And it'll benefit you.
Human.
Anyway, guys, thanks for watching tonight. Join us every Wednesday for the Meta Perspective Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Meta Perspective out. Meta Perspective Podcast.